Welcome back to the Insights podcast by the UNSW Law Society. We're your hosts for this episode, Brad and Audrey.
Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging.
So, this episode is sponsored by Gilbert and Tobin. Gilbert and Tobin's mission is to be Australia's leading transaction, regulatory, and disputes law firm, committed to outstanding citizenship.
From your first day with G&T, you will be exposed to milestone deals and major clients across Australia, Asia, Europe, North America, and emerging markets. You'll also have the opportunity to work in practice areas focused on ESG and the transition to renewable energy, as well as emerging regulatory change and tech transformation. G&T has always challenged the status quo and been willing to take a stand. That includes constitutional recognition of Indigenous voice, as well as supporting social justice through their pro bono practice. This requires fresh thinking and energy from talented people who are ready to learn from every opportunity.
Work at the forefront of significant change in our society and economy, and open the door to experiences that will shape your career, wherever you want it to take you.
In this episode, we'll be talking with Philippa Hofbrucker, an experienced litigator and partner in the disputes and investigations practice at Gilbert and Tobin. Philippa specialises in regulatory investigations and enforcements, significant litigation, including class actions, and other complex disputes. Philippa represents corporations and individuals in all sectors. She has particular expertise in financial services and has acted on some of Australia's most high-profile financial service disputes. Philippa also spent time working in disputes in London, at Magic Circle firms and at a global bank.
So, we'll also be joined by Harry Meixner. Harry was part of G&T's summer clerkship program between 2019 and 2020, after which he joined the firm as a graduate in 2021. He's now a lawyer in the disputes and investigations team at Gilbert and Tobin, and we'll dive into all the things to do with disputes and investigation with both Philippa and Harry, and we'll gain more insight into life at G&T.
Perfect. So to start, we have a few icebreaker questions for both of you. So first one is, what is one thing you can't live without? Philippa, do you want to go first?
I'll go first. Okay, so I should note that I'm saying this when it's a Monday morning, but for me, one of the things I can't live without is that Friday night feeling. You know, the feeling where you've just had a huge productive week, you've got 2 days ahead of you with your friends and your family. I tend to have a glass of wine in hand, and it is just for me, it's just the best part of the week.
Amazing. I have to ask, are you a red or white kind of girl?
Red, 100%.
Red, there you go. I heard something recently that was red wine is for sleepy nights and white wine is for going out. What do you think about that?
For me, I think both would be true. Red wine is for going out and for sleepy nights.
Fair enough. Harry, what about you?
I think for me, I drink a very specific type of English breakfast tea called Yorkshire tea. Mm-hmm. I bring it with me everywhere I go when I travel, and I bring it to work with me. So that probably would be the answer to that question for me.
Love that. I was going to ask, is that something that you keep in your desk drawer, or do you share that with other people at work, or are you very private about it?
I keep it in the kitchen, and I'm always happy to share, and I always offer it to other tea enthusiasts. So definitely.
That's great.
I was trying to think how I could secretly steal your tea stash until you said
You're
that.
always welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, those sounds great. So, what is one of your favourite childhood memories?
So for me, this is a little bit cliche, but it was Christmas. So I'm half German. My dad is born in Germany, and the Germans just know how to Christmas. So I was like big into the food, into the Santa magic, into spending time with family. And it's still one of the happiest parts of my childhood.
Love that. Is there a particular type of food that just sticks with you from Christmas?
Yeah, so a type of food is called Knödel. It's a German dish. It's sort of it's made with bread, like a dumpling thing with sauce, and just goes really well with turkey. And then the next day, on Christmas Day, we'll fry it in a lot of butter. So it is very, very bad for you, but so delicious.
Worth it.
Yeah.
That's great. Mine relates to Christmas as well. I think every Christmas since I was very small, we go for a holiday at this very specific beach in Queensland called Peregian Beach, and it's my mum's one of 6 kids, and so we have lots of cousins, and they'd always come as well, and so it'd just be a huge family reunion every year, which is just an incredible holiday to have at the end of the year and something to always look forward to.
Yeah, awesome. So are you from Queensland?
I am from Queensland.
Whereabouts are you from?
From Brisbane.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I lived in Brisbane, went to uni there, and moved to Sydney to start my job as a grad here at G&T.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
great. So on the note of travelling, where would both of you go if you could book a flight anywhere in the world right now? Let's start with you, Harry.
I think my next trip will be skiing. I love skiing, but I actually haven't gone in quite a few years. And so I think maybe Japan in January or February next year. I'd love to go there.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So mine is not very glamorous. Mine would be Dayton in Ohio in the US because my brother actually lives there, and 3 days ago they had a little baby. So I have a very fresh little nephew waiting for me in Dayton, Ohio.
That's so beautiful.
So that is where I'd catch a plane to.
Well, congratulations to your brother. That's
Thank
very
you.
exciting.
It's their third boy. So
Oh,
they're
wow.
like, yeah, it's a lot of kids.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, we'll get into the questions now. First of all, can you explain to our students what exactly disputes and investigations entails? Maybe, Philippa, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So at G&T, disputes and investigations basically captures any form of contentious or potentially contentious work. So we act for organisations and individuals in litigation, so in court proceedings or proceedings before tribunals. We act in regulatory investigations and civil penalty proceedings, so that's like matters pursued by ASIC and the ACCC. We act in internal investigations if a company suspects there may have been some wrongdoing or breaches of the law and want to look into it. We can help them with that. We act in alternative dispute resolution processes like arbitration or mediation. We act in parliamentary inquiries. Pardon me, we act in royal commissions. Basically, all that kind of work that your parents and your friends think that lawyers do is the kind of stuff we do. So we're kind of like the classic lawyers, I guess.
Right, awesome.
Perfect. So let's start with Harry this time. Can you tell us more about your role and general responsibilities at G&T and how they fit into disputes?
Yeah, so for me, I'm a junior lawyer, so my primary role is to support senior lawyers and partners in the work that they do, and also whilst developing my own skills and experience. The stuff that I do all the time is research, so preparing research memos on things relevant to ongoing disputes, helping with the preparation of evidence, helping with the preparation of affidavits, assisting in discovery processes, reviewing documents, organising documents for review, and also things relevant to upcoming hearings, so preparing bundles for upcoming hearings, and going to court to assist the senior lawyers and partners when court's on. So that's kind of my role.
Yeah, awesome. And how does that compare to yours, Philippa?
Yeah, so I'm a partner in the disputes group, so I've got 2 key responsibilities. One is to bring matters or work in the door, and the other part of my job is to supervise those matters. And so I'm the one that's responsible ultimately for the legal strategy on the matter and for supervising every piece of legal work that goes out the door and the advice that we provide to the client. So in terms of kind of my day-to-day, I will supervise the lawyers' work really closely and work with them. So my role includes things like settling draft advice to clients, reviewing and finalising the affidavits, other court documents. I'll speak with the client a lot and the barristers that are engaged in the matter because we're often talking about strategy and our key approach to things. I go to court hearings. I prepare witnesses to give evidence in court or before regulators. And then there's also a key kind of pastoral care aspect to the role as well. So in supervising the lawyers, you're also trying to mentor the lawyers both, with their particular pieces of work, but also how they, navigate that part of their career and how they build up their skills. So that's a key part of what I do as a partner as well.
Yeah, great. You mentioned that you also are responsible for bringing work to the firm. Could you maybe expand a little bit about that process? I'm sure a lot of students wouldn't understand that sort of aspect of your job.
Yeah, so it's like what we'd call the business development aspect. So I think in disputes it works a bit differently to other practice areas because it's all about your relationships. Because really when things aren't going well for a client or might not go well is that they want to get somebody engaged who they trust. So it's not the kind of thing where you could maybe just issue a nice pamphlet and say, hey, come to G&T, look how, shiny and things great look here. You have to have really built that trust with people through your relationships. So it's really all about your networks and just, if you do a great job on one matter, people remember that, and then that's how it will lead to more work.
And obviously each case would be so different, but how long do these matters usually take to resolve?
It can vary on so many different things. The complexity of the case, the willingness of the parties to negotiate and settle the dispute, the need for court intervention, the specific legal issues at play, and additionally whether there are any appeals, because any appellate processes can add years to disputes. And many of the cases that we work on in the team will take years to resolve. So it really depends.
Yeah, okay.
So let's get back to Philippa for a second. So could you tell us about your progress or journey at the firm to get to where you are now as a partner in disputes?
I joined G&T in February 2018 and had actually come across from Allen's because a partner who I worked with at Allen's had come across to G&T. And on my first day at G&T, it was at the very start of the Banking Royal Commission, and we were acting for Westpac. And for any lawyer who's lived through the Banking Royal Commission, it was possibly the just toughest part of my legal career to date, because the deadlines were just so tough, and I think almost every law firm in the country had some role. So what that meant is that I really hit the ground running. So I started at G&T, and I think from day one I was just working on this big crazy matter. And then 7 months later I actually went on parental leave to have my second baby. And it was while I was on parental leave that the opportunity for partnership came up, because I think even though I hadn't been at G&T for that long, I'd been able to really kind of, show how I worked during the Banking Royal Commission. And so I went through the partnership application process whilst I was on leave. I remember presenting my business case to the G&T board and then leaving and going to baby music class because I was still on parental leave. But yeah, I became a partner and then returned from parental leave as a partner, which was pretty cool.
That's amazing. Can I ask, so with the partnership application process, what does that entail?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different. This was about 5 years ago, and it's a little bit different now, but you basically have to prepare an application which sets out what your business case is. That you then present that application to your practice group. You chat with Danny Gilbert, who is the head of the firm. You have to present to the board, and you really have to show the partnership, I guess, how you can contribute to what we're trying to build and grow here, and how you'd be the right fit, culturally, and about all of our values that will really help progress those values as well.
And how did you go navigating that alongside maternity leave and, being a parent? Obviously that's such a big responsibility in itself.
Yeah.
How do you go about managing that with being a partner? That's such an incredible achievement.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes, or a lot of the time it's tough, but I have an amazing support network around me. I have incredible partner, family. We have a lot of help as well through things like daycare and those types of things. So I think having those support networks around me has been really key to try and, be able to do what I do here, but also trying to communicate here that, I have I've got 3 kids, I've got a life and responsibility at home, and trying to set as best as I can some boundaries with that as well. And I found it's one of the things I love about G&T actually the most is it's got a real commitment to gender diversity and supporting that, which kind of, I guess, my story really demonstrates.
That leads perfectly into our next question, which was about gender diversity. So how would you describe the practice area in itself? Would it be largely female-dominated, male-dominated, or evenly split?
So this is super cool. We are 60% women in D&I
Wow.
Sydney partners. Lawyers, I don't have the breakdown for lawyers, but it would probably be the same, I think.
Yeah.
And that's really great, particularly because in the disputes profession generally, particularly at the very senior levels, like in the judiciary and the bar in particular, it's still really male dominated. So the fact that we are majority female is really cool.
That's
Yeah,
incredible.
G&T's commitment to that is very clear, and your story, Philippa, shows that, and it's a great story.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And not the only one too, which
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
good.
Yeah.
I love how committed G&T is to gender diversity, and let's more talk about the actual disputes team now. So how big is the team, and is there a lot of collaboration, or how does it compare to other practice areas with regarding your workload?
Yeah, so in Sydney, the disputes team is made up of 13 partners and around 100 lawyers, so it's a big team. As a team, we collaborate closely with other teams in the firm. For example, the M&A team, during a deal, will help them with litigation due diligence, or if any specific litigation issues come up. In terms of how it compares to other teams, in disputes, lawyers and partners usually work on multiple cases concurrently, all of which have varying deadlines and various commitments and responsibilities. In a transactional team, the workload is heavily influenced by the pace of the deal, and that can be very unpredictable and fast-paced. In disputes, in my experience at least, sometimes the deadlines can be a bit more predictable because you get the court timetable and evidence timetable in advance. But that being said, it really depends, and there's always surprises. So from my perspective, that's how they differ between the transactional and litigation teams.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So it all does sound very enticing. I mean, you're doing a great job of selling it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. What drew you to a career in disputes in the first place? Was that something that you've always sort of considered at the back of your mind, or was that only after coming to G&T?
To be honest, I hadn't always considered it. I left uni thinking that I'd become a corporate lawyer in an M&A team. And then I came to disputes and really loved it, and decided to stay. I think there's probably a few things I like about disputes work. I think, firstly, you learn a lot about how the world works. In every case that you work on, and they're very varied cases, you get to dive very deep into your client's industry and your client's business, and really work out what goes on in that type of business. And so you learn so much about how the world works. Secondly, me personally, I like the academic challenge of taking on a very difficult and challenging legal question. I love preparing long and complex research notes, and I think the satisfaction of coming to an answer, coming to a resolution, and perhaps for that resolution to be incorporated into final submissions or the case strategy going forward is really satisfying. Finally, I also really like going to court as well, because I think it's kind of a theatrical conclusion to all of the day-to-day work that you've been working hard on. And you present it to a judge and see how it goes. It's really interesting.
What was your first experience of that like? Was it very daunting, or did you sort of just hit the ground running like Philippa mentioned?
Yeah, it was daunting, but there's you're helping out in a big team, and there's lots of support around, and it can be stressful, but it's also really exciting to go to court, and it's one of the highlights of a job in disputes, I would say, and I'm sure that's the view is shared by most other lawyers in disputes. Going to court is really great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I like how you talked about, diving into the client's world. So what kind of clients do you both deal with?
So our clients are really varied. So we probably predominantly work for organisations, but also do some individual work as well, which I'll come back to. But in terms of the organisations we act for clients in a whole range of industries, and also not just the big companies as well. So we have a lot of ASX 200 clients that we work with, but also, organisations like private equity firms, not-for-profits, a lot of financial services institutions. That's a big part of what we do. Government entities, insurers, media companies. I don't know. Can you think of others, Harry?
I've done work for unions and for political parties. It's really
varied.
Yeah.
And an interesting part of where our practice is going in sort of more recent years is that we're doing a lot more individual work as well. So working with directors and boards or senior management, because a lot of the regulators, and in particular ASIC, have a really big focus on individual accountability and responsibility. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to work more and more directly with individuals, which is really interesting, and obviously kind of calls on different skill sets to when you're working with organisations.
The other thing I'd add to that as well is that as lawyers and partners have the opportunity to be involved in our pro bono practice here at G&T, and so you can get exposure to many other varied clients as well in that capacity, not-for-profits and more individuals too.
That sounds like it would be rewarding as well as challenging as well. Yeah, that's great. What other sort of career paths are there in litigation, maybe for students who want to know what options they have?
At G&T, we don't have strict titles like associate and senior associate. That means that talented lawyers aren't ever held back by their title, which I think promotes a culture of meritocracy, collaboration. Yeah. And so that's how it all works at G&T. And then in disputes generally, there are some other career paths as well. Many people become solicitors and then eventually sit the bar exam and become a barrister, which is a sole practitioner. And as solicitors, you work with barristers every day. Solicitors brief barristers to act in court proceedings and appeals. Then there are some other roles. For example, a government lawyer can do litigation work as well, and also in-house counsel as well.
And what I'd say was interesting about in-house is that traditionally a transactional legal skill set has kind of been more transferable to the in-house market. But that's actually starting to change because as organisations have become subject to more regulatory scrutiny in particular, they're wanting lawyers who have seen what the worst case looks like and can therefore help more effectively mitigate against that because they've sort of seen the outcome of that. So, we're seeing kind of more and more the dispute skill set being an attractive skill that's also needed in-house.
I love that you talked about, the labels and the roles, those lines sort of being a bit blurred. I think that really speaks to G&T's culture of equality and, inclusivity and stuff like that as well. Would you say on that same level, in terms of support, is there a lot of mentorship or sort of guidance from senior lawyers to junior lawyers or partners to grads? Are there any sort of programs or just different things that you implement at the firm that might just happen usually?
Yeah, so did we call it D&I? In D&I, we have a mentoring program, so there's a bit of formality around it. What I found throughout my career, I don't know if your experience is the same, Harry, but a lot of that happens organically because particularly when you're in a disputes context and there's such high stakes on matters, you work so closely with your team. So that kind of role I was talking about earlier where you supervise work and you're really involved with seeing what the lawyers are doing, that is replicated at every level. So I feel like those mentoring relationships really develop organically through the matter work, and again, not just about matter work, so your legal skills, but also, how do I navigate this tricky situation, and those types of things. So that's what I found throughout my career. I don't know if you've got the same experience.
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly organic, and you work so closely for such a long time with your team that you work out ways to work out how to get the best out of a matter, and you can ask for specific feedback if you like, but also what I find useful is just seeing what eventually goes out to the client or to the barrister or to the court, and seeing what changes were made onto the first draft that I did, and then working that out for myself, that feedback. But that being said, I find the G&T partnership and the senior lawyers here are so very approachable that you can always ask for specific feedback, and if you have any specific questions about what they've changed to your first draft, then it's so easy to just rock up and ask them at their desk. That's what I've done many times as well.
Yeah. I love that. I love how supportive the work environment is. That's really great.
Totally.
Yeah.
Philip has already touched on, the skill sets that might be useful for working here at G&T. Would there be any other extra skills or maybe tips you might say are good or useful to be successful at disputes?
Totally. So this is, so Harry and I, when we were preparing for today, we both were thinking about this question independently and both said exactly the same thing. So the first thing I think you need to be a disputes lawyer is to be curious. So you have to have a curiosity about the world around you, a curiosity to just understand stuff and get to know stuff. So because we can get disputes in all kinds of weird and wonderful ways, you need to just be really interested in really getting something. So, one day you could be doing a dispute about, a particular part of a car, and how does a diesel engine work, and how does this filter work, and just needing to understand the why. And then the next day you're looking into, is this particular, new form of emerging technology a financial product, and is it regulated, and, all these kinds of weird and wonderful ways to intellectually test yourself. I think you just have to have a willingness to want to learn and to get to the bottom of things. The second thing, which is key, I think, to being a disputes lawyer is critical thinking. So that is true, I think, for all lawyers to some extent. But what did you call it, Harry? You called it your bullshit detector.
Yeah, you need a good bullshit detector.
Your bullshit detector
Absolutely.
needs to be particularly strong as a disputes lawyer. So you always want to be questioning, is that right?
Yeah.
And are we sure about that? And should we look at this from another way? And I don't know, I think there's sort of more to that. So just that critically analysing everything that you do, because that's how you develop arguments in response to what your opponent's saying.
And regardless of its source as well, you really have to sometimes really critically look at submissions prepared by Sydney's best eminent senior counsel, and really think, is that actually right? And try and find holes in their argument. And so that's definitely part of the job here.
That sounds so interesting.
Yeah.
On that note then, there's obviously different ways that you could foster that. I mean, some of that might be innate about a person, their curiosity and things like that. But in terms of what students can actively do to maybe expand those skills or gain more experience, are there any extracurriculars or other opportunities that you would recommend to foster those skills?
I think the classic one would be mooting, because you get to develop your legal research and argumentation skills at university and have a go at oral advocacy as well. So that's the classic one that sort of fits into the disputes skill set. But I would also encourage law students to do as much, to be involved as many diverse extracurricular things as possible, because you meet a diverse set of people, and you learn a lot about the world, which is necessary, as we've said, to be curious about how the world works. I would also say that you should not take yourself too seriously at university, and not get too worried about if you have the perfect amount of extracurriculars in order to get the job that you want. The serious stuff can come later, and you should really enjoy your time at university, because it's a really special time. And that being said, finally, I think applying for opportunities like a clerkship at G&T is a great way to get first-hand experience.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Harry, because I think about the many student CVs that come across our desk every day. And I think that when you're at law school, understandably, you're worried about getting the right experience. So people try and get jobs in small law firms or paralegal, and that can be valuable. But, I love a CV where, the person's lived overseas for 6 months, or they've learnt a language in a, completely different area, or, they have a very particular passion for something. So just showing that kind of curiosity and love for something, I think, is really what can set you apart if you're looking for law firm roles.
I think that authenticity is so important as well. A lot of people say you have to present yourself in a way that's true about yourself and not try and be someone or try and tick off those extracurriculars just to get a job or just to be put a step forward. I think that a lot of students would probably struggle with that sort of idea. We're all in this rat race, I guess.
It's hard.
Yeah, there's so much stigma around it as well. I think trying to be the best, but also staying true to yourself. How would you say that both of you sort of navigated that in terms of doing what you still love at uni, but still trying to, have enough experience to put yourself out there?
Yeah, well, I think what I'd say about that is that if you are authentic in your interview process and in your application, it all becomes much easier because you actually have things that you could talk about with passion and energy, and that is very conspicuous to the interviewers as well. I'm not sure if you have anything to add, Philippa?
No, I think for me, I wasn't very strategic at all. I probably could have been a lot more strategic, but I just did what I loved. So I did the subjects that I enjoyed doing, and so then if you do stuff you like, you're more likely to do well at it. And I just tried to do what I love. So I travelled a bit before starting as a graduate, and I think it was just probably that authenticity that really stood out for me. But I mean, also to be fair to everybody today, it was a different market 15 years ago as well. So it is a tougher market, but I really think authenticity wins at the end of the day.
That's great.
Yeah, so it was great to hear about your university journeys. So let's move on to your life at the firm at G&T. So I'm going to start off with, what is the firm like at G&T? Are there any personal highlights for either of you in terms of people or cultural community?
The people are so good. I feel like the partners in disputes, I feel like we really fiercely protect the culture of our team and the collegiate work environment that we have. So I feel like people genuinely like and respect each other, and obviously we work alongside each other on matters, but we also celebrate life milestones. So all the good stuff like marriages, babies, cool achievements, but also when times aren't as great personally as well. And I feel like we really corral around each other, and it's a key thing of what I love every day, but also want to create for the people that we work with. So no particular kind of people moment, just the everyday, but I also love that this firm is really committed to social justice. I love the stand we took on The Voice. We were really vocal in the debate about same-sex marriage. I like that we lead with values. That's really important to me as well.
Love that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the people are just a huge highlight of G&T. And I remember during the clerkship process, there are all of these cocktail events where you can meet people from different firms. And I really encourage you to go to as many of those as you can, because I remember I went to all of them, as many as I could. And when I spoke to G&T people, I kind of felt a sort of gut feeling that I belonged at a place like this. And you can only get that if you go to as many of those types of events as you can. And so I think the people are a real highlight of the firm. And from lawyers who move from other firms, I've only ever worked at G&T, but other lawyers say that exact same thing, that the people are a highlight, and it's kind of like a different culture here at G&T, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. On a more informal note, obviously you'll have different teams and practice areas within the firm. Would you say there's any sort of joking like rivalry between the practice areas. You know, some firms might do trivia and break off into different teams. Are there anything
Well,
like that?
Yeah, we're about to beat corporate in the trivia event. That's coming up in a week.
We're indeed preparations.
Yeah, we don't even really need to prepare.
No,
so,
that's true.
Yeah. There's obviously that fun rivalry. I mean, we work well with the other practice groups. I mean, there's kind of like good-natured banter, like
Exactly.
like that.
Yeah.
And you'll get that in the clerkship, and as you go into the graduate program as well, some of your peers will go to different teams, and you'll always justify your choice to them, and they'll have to justify their choice to you.
We always joke because we always call ourselves the real lawyers.
Yeah,
Which is when we
exactly.
sneak that in at the
Yeah.
beginning about like classic lawyers, and so we
Yeah.
always have that banter with corporate. But then they'll be like, "Oh, you guys are so legalistic
Yeah,
and
yeah.
commercial," and
Yeah.
So there's that, which
That's
is
so
fun.
funny. I love that good-natured banter and rivalry. That's amazing. It sounds like you guys not only work hard, but you also have fun in the firm. Yeah, which I think is great.
Yeah.
We
Good
do.
work culture.
Yeah, I agree. The culture sounds amazing, really fun. How about in terms of, a more work-related achievement? What would you say is a highlight you had at G&T?
Okay, I'll go first because I saw yours, Harry. Yours sounds a bit cooler than mine. But so look, for me, it's a matter I'm currently working on. I'm acting for Macquarie Bank in a class action about car dealer auto finance, which does not sound like the sexiest subject, I admit. But we've got to do all these really cool applications in the class action space. So the matter's in the Supreme Court of Victoria, which has this novel thing called a group costs order. And so this matter was one of the ones that the court first looked at for a group costs order. We've made other novel applications. We've got something called a class closure order, which is pretty novel in the space that we're doing. But I think really what that demonstrates is that no matter what the subject matter is, the stuff you're doing is really intellectually stimulating, and you're literally creating law. Like, you're at the forefront of, in this case, class action jurisprudence. And that's just really cool. I get a real kick out of that. And also the client's great and the team is great. So it's just a really fun way to work.
That's awesome.
Yeah. For me, it was being involved in the Bernard Collaery case. So G&T acted for this guy called Bernard Collaery in defence of these very serious national security charges brought against him by the Commonwealth. It was an incredibly complicated case with so many moving parts, and a criminal case as well, which is something that you wouldn't expect to work on at a firm like this. It had a very small solicitor team, and I was able to dive in and get involved right away and help the team with some of these really complicated, interesting, novel, legal and factual questions. And in 2022, after 4 years, the government dropped his prosecution, which was just a huge win for our client, for the team, and was just a really satisfying end to all of the hard work that we've put in. That's the first one. I also want to mention working on this really interesting case we did for Unions New South Wales, which is the industry body for unions in New South Wales. We did this case, which was in the original jurisdiction of the High Court, which was a implied freedom of political communication case, challenging 2 New South Wales state laws that restricted the ability of unions to campaign before state elections and by-elections. It was also an incredibly interesting case with legal issues. But it was just really cool as a junior lawyer to be involved in a case that went to the High Court, went before the 7 judges. We got to go to Canberra and in the original jurisdiction of the High Court. So you're making law, and there's a judgment that comes out that's published in the Commonwealth Law Reports, and it was just a really exciting case to be involved in. So those 2 are the highlights that I have.
Yeah.
They're like such great highlights.
They
Yeah.
are.
I was so lucky.
How
to
many
work
times
on
have you
them.
been to the High Court and you're a how many year lawyer?
I know, it was incredible. Yeah.
awesome.
See, guys, disputes is where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I love most about your answers is just how passionate you both are in telling them. I mean, no matter what you're saying, it sounds like you both truly love what you're doing. Harry, you mentioned that you came to G&T on the basis of the clerkship program.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what that process was like, especially as an interstate student?
Yeah,
What was
certainly.
that like for you?
Yeah, sure. So at some point towards the end of uni, I decided that I wanted to move to Sydney. I had some family here, and I just kind of wanted a new challenge in a new city. And so I made the decision to apply for Sydney Clerkships. And I wanted to do it right, so I had to fly down for a lot of the interviews and a lot of the events, like the cocktail evenings that I've talked about. So for me, it was a difficult and it was a difficult process, and I think for all law students it's a difficult process because you really don't know what exactly the firms are looking for, what criteria they use to assess your application, and it's an incredibly difficult and long process that takes up a lot of your time. So I think the advice that I would have for students in that process is to just go to as many events that the firms put on, that the Law Society puts on, to get to know as much as possible about the process. And that's what I did, and I think that's what made the difference for me. Meet as many people as you can at all the different firms, and then you'll have more to talk about in your application and more to talk about in the interview as well.
Within the application process, are there opportunities to express an interest in disputes and investigations, or is that something that comes later on?
Yeah, certainly. If you have an interest in disputes and investigations, you should definitely put that in your application.
We love it. To say that, to put that in an application, and then as well to raise it during the clerkship process, particularly if maybe you weren't interested in it to start with, but as you learn more, it's something that you become aware of. We just love that enthusiasm and passion, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, but make sure it's genuine as well, because
Definitely.
you need to have some things to back up your interest and things to talk about in the interview. So you shouldn't just say it if for the sake of saying it. That would be what I say.
Yeah, no, definitely. In terms of students being allocated to a rotation in disputes for their clerkship, how many do you usually expect per program?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the year.
Yeah.
Like, we kind of varies from year to year, depend on how many people we take in a clerk intake as well.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a specific number.
Right, okay.
I think it really depends on
It's
the
a business
business need,
Yeah.
and the preferences as well. I think HR tries to allocate to put summer clerks in their preferred rotations as much as possible, according to business need and according to what other people have made as preferences as well. So there's no specific number, but
Perfect, yeah. So it's not concrete as we're only taking
No.
5.
no,
That's great.
exactly.
Then,
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Business need
Yeah.
thing.
So, how long would this clerk rotation be, and what kind of work will clerks be expected to do when they enter the field?
Yeah, sure. So each clerkship rotation is 4 weeks.
That's right. So 2 during the clerkship over the summer.
That's right. So you get 2 during the clerkship. And in disputes, the kind of work that they will do, so we always try and get our clerks to court. There's generally always at least 1 or 2 things happening in court around that time. So we'll try and get them to court. We'll try and get them to assist on any of the tasks that are going on in the team. So it could be preparing a chronology or going to an interview with a witness, maybe drafting a small section of an affidavit. So try and get the full kind of suite of skills. We also try and get the clerks along to any conferences with the barristers as well, so they can see how those dynamics work. If you ever get to see inside a barrister's office, you'll see how messy and chaotic it is, which is like,
Absolutely.
can be interesting to see. What about, are there any other things that are worth calling out, Harry?
Well, I think generally at G&T we want clerks to do as much real legal work as possible, not just busy work, and that was certainly the case during my clerkship. I was in the competition team for one of my rotations, and I was helping draft a merger application document, which is this huge document that you submit to the ACCC to get a merger approved. And I was very pleased to see that once that got published on the ACCC, one of the little tiny small paragraphs that I had drafted essentially made it into the final product. And so that's an example of clerks actually doing real legal work. So hopefully, as a clerk, you don't just do busy work, you can actually really help with all the tasks that lawyers do and get a real taste for what we do here.
Yeah, I love how you take the clerks under your wing and really show them what you're doing and not just sort of leave them to their own devices. I think that's, again, speaks to the work culture.
Yeah, and trying to get them involved in as many meetings as possible as
Yeah.
well, because it's a great experience for a clerk to be involved in a really interesting strategic meeting, even if they're just taking notes and listening along. And that was my experience. It was a real highlight of my clerkship, those type of things.
Lovely. If a clerk is successful in their clerkship program and they get a graduate offer, in terms of the rotations, how does that work? Are they, again, putting their interest in a certain area, or are they allocated? How does that work?
So, bit of column A, column B, but the key thing driving it all is preferences. So, at what point in the process exactly do you put your preferences in?
I think
Just
it's
once you've...
a few months before you start the graduate program, and then you get allocated your preferences a few weeks before. You get to know your preferences then.
Perfect.
And so we'll take into account where people want to go, and then also what the business needs are of that particular group. So that will, I guess, dictate how many spots there are available. And then you try and allocate people based on their preferences. And even if you don't get your first preference in your first rotation, the idea is that then those grads would have that taken into account more for your second rotation. So it's really trying to make sure that all the graduates get a chance to do the areas that they're interested in. One thing, though, I would say is just the importance of an open mind as well going into all this, because it's amazing how many clerk interviews I sit in and people say, I just want to do this type of law. And, maybe that's true for them, but I think in a lot of cases, until you actually do it, you don't actually know what you like and what you enjoy. So I've certainly seen grads over the years, not so much for us because who wouldn't want to do disputes, but who sort of say, I really don't want to do this area, but then end up loving it and just finding a home. So I think just being open-minded, and things like my example of my work highlight that, might not sound super interesting to start with, actually can prove to be really interesting. So, I think that keeping an open mind is really important.
Yeah, definitely. As a summer clerk or as a graduate, before you start, you have no idea what a lawyer in a specific team does. I certainly didn't. What does a real estate transaction lawyer do day to day? What are they actually working on? What are they sending to clients at the end of the day? So I think definitely keep an open mind. And as I said before, I may not have had an open mind, but luckily I was put into disputes as a rotation. I've stayed here since. So definitely have an open mind and.
And so can a clerk be put into disputes as a graduate if they are successful without any prior experience, or do you expect them to have completed a rotation?
No, they can, completely fresh, never having done this area before. And because it's when you're starting out, it's not really about your knowledge. It's about your fundamental skill set, which is all the things you've learned as a law student and are now trying to flex as a lawyer. So you don't need any prior experience.
Yeah, and so you don't have to do a rotation you don't have to do one of your graduate rotations in your clerkship as well. So you can. It's a completely new set of preferences that you put in.
And sometimes people strategically want that as well, because they're like, well, I feel like I've had a bit of a taste of what these practice groups do. So now I want to try and use it to try and find a different practice area. At the end of rotations, like if a lawyer wants to settle in that particular group, generally the practice group as well will want them. You tend to like an area if you're good at it. And then if, you're good at it and you've been getting great work and presumably you want to stay there because you've not like you've been sitting around doing nothing for 3 months, then that tends to be kind of a natural marriage. Business needs, of course, are always important, but I feel like a lot of it's driven by the graduate preferences and where they feel like they fit and the team feels like they fit. Probably the key takeaway is just that point about authenticity and just do what you love, and then you'll be good at what you love, and don't get too hung up on the things that you feel like you should be doing, because then you're in such a great time of your life to just try and enjoy it a bit as well, and that will come through for you in whatever jobs you pursue.
Yeah, that I would say exactly the same thing. I think during the clerkship process, be professional and engaged. ask as many thoughtful questions as you can throughout the process. The best thing about asking questions that you genuinely want to know the answer to is that you will be engaged when they respond, and then you'll have follow-up questions, and during an interview that kind of dynamic is a really good dynamic to have, and it's not just question answer. So I think that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you both so much. If there's nothing else that you'd like to add, we really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today, taking time out of your busy schedules, no doubt. It's been really great to hear all of your insight and your passion, as I mentioned before, about this practice area. I'm sure a lot of students will appreciate all of the advice that you've given us and all of the tips that you've shared through your own experiences, which I think is really crucial to someone considering applying for a clerkship or just generally working with G&T in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Insights by UNSW Law Society. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any further episodes. Goodbye!